Guys, what is going on? Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the last sound design hangout. We got into Max4Live, specifically 3 instruments, bass, multi, and poly, that are very interesting, unique synthesizers that are very unusual and very simple, and the most. And so we got into those. So if you want more on multi, poly, or bass, which are Max4Live synthesizers that everyone has, if you've got Ableton Live Suite, yeah, go back and watch that one because it's amazing, and they're very interesting. Like, take a listen to this. Like, this is just the default. Ouch. Kind of sounds just like tension. And then there's this weird one. So it's really fun. So that one we were just playing, right? No, not that one. Poly is more like traditional. There's really not too many things to get into. It sounds really good, so I would encourage you to watch that. So why do I get into that? Well, because today I wanted to take a look at Max4Live because it doesn't get used very often. And with the release of Ableton Live 11, you kind of saw Max4Live go from its like little folder over here, and it's sort of penetrated the audio effects and instrument categories. So if you go to instruments here, wow. I didn't even realize this. Look at all these instruments. Now it's weird because if you go to group and folder, it like opens all of this stuff up. So if I, this is really weird. It actually didn't used to look this way. So if I go to group and folder here, this is how it looks. You've got all of these folders to click through. And if you come to modulators, you've got the envelope follower, LFO, shaper, I guess vector map, which I haven't even seen before. I actually did just upload, or I just like downloaded a few extra packs. So if you wanted to know where you downloaded a lot of this stuff, you come into packs down here, and these all come with, a full version of Ableton Live. And you can see that I've got a few. I didn't download all of them, but now in Ableton Live 11, you've got these available packs. Now these things will either be in the packs section, or they can also be added to Max4Live. So if we scroll down here, you'll see like Max4Live building tools, Max4Live pluggo, which I don't know what pluggo is, but it's probably interesting. But there's like a few sort of notable ones, and those sort of notable ones have sort of always lived in Max4Live. I think when you download the core library, they've got like a lot of common Max4Live stuff. So I'm going to go over maybe some of the most used Max4Live things. When you come in here to audio effects and you, first of all, you didn't have these folders before. So drive and color. This is like a lot of the overdrive, distortion, saturation type devices. If you right click on any of these and undo group and folder, it will just give you all of these. And it's really weird because it never just listed Convolution Reverb Pro. Like literally this just changed. Like I just started using Max4Live again, and like these just got added, which is weird. I'm not even sure why, but if you drag Convolution Reverb Pro, yeah, you get that. Also the convolution reverb. Now these are all bundled into the hybrid reverb. And I kind of don't like that they added these extra audio effects. Like I don't want this here anymore. I don't know why it did that. Like I just installed a couple of extra packs and now I've got like the convolution. It's weird. It's almost like I just opened up the convolution reverb in Max4Live and it just added it to my audio effects. And I don't really want that, you know? So if I open up reverb, I mean, I guess it's cool because like they're here right now. But I'm like, I don't know. It was kind of neater and tidier. So yeah, not a big deal. So we're going to be looking at Max4Live and just sort of like running through all the cool stuff that you would find there. So the first thing I wanted to mention is I want to talk about the three main devices or audio effects from Max4Live that got added to the audio effects folder. So again, if you open these up, you can see all the different things in here. Whenever they look like this, they're a Max4Live device. So Convolution Reverb Pro. You see how it's got these little ups and these little two downs. Almost looks like a plug or something because you're like plugging it in Max4Live. But you've got this modulator section here, and until I did that updating vector map, which I don't even know what that is, I don't really care. In fact, let's just drag it. What is vector map? It'll be interesting, I can tell you that much. You can basically just, I guess, modulate parameters to this little bouncing ball, you know, think about like an X and Y axis. And you can change these things. But I think when you have like the most default, like when you download Ableton Live Suite and install everything, you've got this shaper, LFO, and envelope follower Max4Live devices. Now you're going to use this LFO all the time. In fact, let's drag an operator on here. I'm going to close this EQ8 just so it doesn't get in the way. It's just cutting out the very low lows. I'm going to record enable this track. Now, right now, when you drag this LFO on here, that just says you can map this sine wave at 1 hertz to any parameter. So there we are. That's just a sine wave because we're in slot A. It's a sine wave. If I were to click map and I were to put it on the frequency, now, I want you to look at something here with the LFO. Now, if you're already saying, hey, I already know about LFO, I don't need to know about this, well, I don't blame you. You're probably feeling that way because you're strapped for time. You know what I mean? We want to get as much as we possibly can. But I want to go to this first because what I'm going to be doing is, hold on, is I'm going to go over the LFO, then envelope follower, then shaper. I wish you could just hide this. I don't want to see this anymore. In fact, I don't want to see it. Out of sight, out of mind. I want to get you out of my mind, vector map, because you're throwing a wrench into my sound design hangout. You are no longer invited to the hangout vector map. Now I have to learn vector map. Do I have to learn everything in this? Maybe that's what I'm doing. I've got to learn everything for you guys. But it's good because I wouldn't be playing around with Max4Live. So yeah, we're going to be getting into this. In fact, I'm going to turn this off because this thing going up and down is like giving me anxiety. Smash a like if you got that anxiety. Yo, that anxiety ain't got no dominion over me. So Max4Live, what is Max4Live? Really quickly, it came with Ableton Live 9, which is when I got in, which was early 2013. That was the first time when like it came with the full version and Max4Live was built in. It had its own little folder down here. You got all these devices. Now, if some of you are like, hey, Max4Live has been around in Ableton Live 8 or Ableton Live 7. You might be right, but I believe in Ableton Live 8, if Max4Live was around, it was more or less like an extension that you bought and then you would like build things with, but it wasn't like fully and seamlessly integrated into the architecture of Ableton Live. So for all intents and purposes, for the majority users, it came around in Ableton Live 9. Now, at the time, if you were someone like me who had never even used a DAW before, but just knew that that Ableton was the thing to get, and 10 years later, roughly, it still the hell is, I made a good decision. You did too. But yeah, Max4Live was there. Now, back then, unless you were like really G'd up, you know, you were mostly probably just using the LFO device, because you can now put an LFO on anything. Now, if you were using the operator here, you'd have an LFO. You know, you could go into here, you could put the LFO on destination A, B, C, or D. You could put it here on the filter, but you weren't actually getting the visual feedback that you would get with this. And so that's why you would maybe even want to use the LFO instead of the inbuilt LFOs. Now, where are there inbuilt LFOs? Well, you'll find that on synthesizers, right? So you've got this LFO up here. You can also go down here to destination B and route the LFO to some of these factors. So these synthesizers, which you would find in the instruments folder, these synthesizers gave you access to these LFOs. And why do you want an LFO? It's a way to add movement to a sound. Because if you have a sound like this, you know, just playing this operator here. Oh, I'm going to delete this LFO. When you're hearing movement like that, it's interesting, right? If you came into here and you changed the waveform to a bright, buzzy waveform like a saw, there's no modulation on it. So all you hear is and when all you hear is just a sound that's static, it hurts. It just doesn't sound good. Imagine if you put the frequency all the way up. It's horrible. But if you put movement on it, suddenly it's more pleasing to the human being. And probably a lot of other beings as well. Okay, so LFO. So you didn't have it in audio effects. And in fact, audio effects looked like this. You know, it had all of our audio effects here. I don't like that they added a bunch of extra audio effects, but that's because I opened the, oh, no, nice. They added one of my favorite ones, Shaper. Maybe this isn't a bad thing. That's another thing, guys. You know, I always take a spiritual angle on this channel because I care about that. It's a big part of my life as well. But, you know, hey, when life gives you some new options and things, don't recoil. Don't think they're going to be bad. Maybe it's good, because I realize my most favorite device in Max4Live is this Shaper, which we touched on briefly in the previous SDHO, where we covered those 3 Max4Live synths that actually came with Ableton Live 10, not even Live 11. So they've been around for a while. But in any event, guys, yeah, so you had this huge list, and you would just have the default Ableton Live devices. You actually would have had to have gone to Ableton Live, or excuse me, Max4Live to get some of them. But the ones that you used were the LFO. So you would come to Max4Live, Audio Effect, drag an LFO. And this was the old LFO. You didn't have multiple mappings. So I'm not even going to use that one. But if you go back to Audio Effects, they added the LFO, and they added a better LFO, because not only can you just map one parameter, but you can then map multiple parameters, not like you would want to do this with the resonance. You can lower this so it doesn't go so high. You know, and I wouldn't want this one to go all the way up. See how this thing is going all the way up, or it was going all the way up? So it's going from like 0 hertz all the way up. If we take this depth down, it won't do that. And how resonance isn't doing that, that's because we constrained the range right over here. And it's going too fast, so let's take down the rate. I want to find a range I like that doesn't go that low. So those are just some basic things you would do. Now, I'm going to group back in folder. Modulators. So we had our LFO, envelope follower, and Shaper. Now let's go to Shaper next. Shaper is just like LFO, except you can think of it as a custom LFO. So instead of having that nice sine wave pattern, we can have this up-down pattern, which kind of looks like the like the saw wave, but it's not. So let's map it to frequency. So it's repeating. Because You can change it here. But look at this. Too fast, right? So if we want to go back to hertz, before we started with that 1 hertz, but let's go down lower. Now it's going up too much because we got that depth way too high, right? And we can choose the offset parameter. Now it's going way too high. It's hurting my ears. And I feel like I see Merlin over there like squirming, which means that that's like annoying him too, which I don't want to now annoy anyone. Sometimes when you're doing sound design, things get unruly, but I don't want it to start all the way down here because I don't want it to go all the way up and all the way. See how it's starting clicking over at like 200? That's because I moved this offset up. So if I put the offset back down to 0, it should click over here to 0 or the lowest amount. In fact, we put depth down, so that's why it's not going all the way down. So all the way up, starting all the way down. So so I just want to let you know that this is the same darn thing. So like you're not going to get this sort of a repeating envelope in LFO. So like you can think of Shaper as more or less just like and you can do things like you can like up this grid, you can do other breakpoints. So now we've got really crazy stuff. Snap it to these grids. Maybe if we turn snap off, we can. So when are you going to get things like, when are you going to get like an LFO that's going to do something like this? You're not. You're going to get it with Shaper. But I don't care. I'll do that another time. Because like when you drop the LFO, you've got a sine wave, right? And yeah, you can add this jitter to it to like make it be a little bit less predictable, right? That's really cool. You can change it from a sine wave to a triangle wave, right? Square wave, you know what that's going to be. Jeep don't. Random. Let's move the depth down. Got it. But now we've got a big one for you, envelope follower. Now what envelope follower is going to do is it basically is a way to give you velocity sensitivity or to add velocity to a parameter that doesn't have velocity. So right now when I come into operator and I click on oscillator A, you can see I've got a velocity parameter here at 50%. If I put it at 0, every note's going to be the same. In fact, you can even see it down here. They're all the same. But if I add velocity, and I'm playing notes that trigger different velocities, which I'm not because I'm playing my laptop keys. And if you wanted to know how to play on your own laptop keys, click this yellow button up here. It's got to be activated. I'm not going to get velocity. So if I want to get a lot of different velocities, I'm going to play like my MIDI keyboard. But because this is just easier to record for you guys, I need a way to get different velocities. So I'm going to go into MIDI effects and I'm going to drop a velocity device and I'm going to crank up the random. I'm just going to change some of these just so they don't, it doesn't really matter. And so now, if we played zero velocity, it's still going to be the same, but watch what happens when we turn this velocity up. Now, the velocity is affecting the volume, so you now watch and see changes in volume, okay? And it should update on this thing as well. Now, check it out. Look at these changes in velocity and changes in volume. Now, similarity, we can do this with the frequency. That's another one, because remember I said like the main components is like volume, pitch, and the frequency makeup. So if I come over here to filter, frequency to velocity. So that's really all well and good. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, what if I wanted to, you know, come over and have a saturator and I wanted the harder I hit, the harder I hit, because what velocity does and why it's important is because if you're playing an instrument like a guitar, you know what I mean, or like any instrument, the harder you hit a note, the more it will ring, the louder it will be, so the more volume. You know, even with this filter, the harder you would hit a note, the brighter it would probably be, you know, especially if you were playing like an electric piano. If you really hit the keys so much, harmonics are coming through. And so you would, if you were playing soft, you would want it to be a little bit quieter. You would want the frequency to be down, but then you were like, you're playing your synthesizer. You want to be expressive. You're hitting the notes and a big part comes up and you're whang, and you hit those keys and the frequency opens up. You know, it's dynamic, it's brighter, because that's how a real world instrument would be. So when you've got these synthesizers, you've got these samplers, you're going to find velocity routings on the volume, on the filter, maybe the LFO, because maybe the LFO will it will input more to the parameters it maps the harder the velocity comes in. So you're going to get that, but you don't start thinking, well, what about our audio effects? What if when I bash some keys, I want the effect of the phaser to get brighter. So if I'm playing quiet, you don't hear the phaser or the flanger, let's say. But if I really hit it hard, you'll hear a lot of phaser. Now, you wouldn't have been able to do that unless you had a routing, you know? So like if I hit it extra hard, I want extra saturator sound, you know, because saturator gives a distortion. So if I hit a note, listen to drive. It's like, I get more saturation, okay? So why don't we map this envelope follower to drive? Now, I don't want drive to ever go negative, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into here, and I'm going to click 50. So it starts right there. Now, that's way too loud. I want to move this down. So see how when I touch a key, and see these ups? I'll go. Notice how the higher they go, the more it moves this drive. Now, the unfortunate thing is I should be playing an actual velocity-sensitive keyboard so I can go, light notes gets you this, hard notes gets you this. Right now, my keyboard is outputting the same amount of velocity, and this velocity device is just randomizing it. So what you will notice is because it's just giving random velocity values for this example, you'll notice that the higher ones, okay, are going to trigger this drive to go up more. So take a look. And you can see when this... now that's a little bit too much, so I might take this gain down. So it's giving movement. You know, some notes, the quieter velocity notes have less saturation. The higher velocity notes have more saturation. Obviously, you want to be playing, as I've mentioned, a velocity-sensitive keyboard, MIDI controller with pads. Me using my laptop keys with this velocity probably wasn't the best way, but I just want to let you know. And if you're not seeing this device change at all, every single one is the same. You want to make sure you have some sort of velocity over here, right? So that's why I've got 74 velocity and then also got some of that down here. So this envelope follower, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but remember I was talking about, but yeah, it's a way to add velocity sensitivity to things that don't have velocity sensitivity. And unless you're using a synthesizer, you're not getting velocity sensitivity on any of these. So in the future, phaser, flanger, saturator, pretty much any audio device, they're going to have some sort of like widget down here that'll be like velocity sensitivity. It's probably just takes a lot to code that in. And yeah, maybe Ableton Live 12 will do that. Who knows? That would make sense, right? Why only be able to have velocity? And that's probably why this envelope follower exists. So I want to map this. I want to map this to the amount of the phaser flanger. So listen to what this phaser flanger does for my sound. Wow, that was too intense. I'm going to go into here and I'm going to turn this down or excuse me, turn this down for drive because it's going up way too much. See how that sounds kind of... You got to play around with these to get it. See, I don't want drive to go up that high to like 13, so I'm going to take this down to 6. You got to play around with it. Now I'm going to map this to the dry wet, but I don't want it to start down at 0. I want to move it up. I want it to start here because I always want there to be some phaser flanger on this. This is a little intense, so I'm going to take the gain down to like 2. And too much volume's coming out of here. So that's envelope follower. We can dive deep into that another time, guys. And I'm going to just delete this velocity. Just to clean up, I'm going to delete the saturator, phaser, envelope follower, and now we just have our operator here. Got this filter on it. Now, what happened is because I've been opening up Max4, so here's the thing. I actually had a lot less Max4Live devices. Like it added like emit to the instruments. And I don't mind that. That's totally cool. But as you will see, where's envelope? Is it envelope MIDI? Oh, wow, envelope MIDI. Haven't even played this one. I think that's probably the updated version of envelope. But in any event, guys, I'm going to ungroup this. So what is another really good Max4Live device that is basically like worth its weight in gold? And actually, it's my new favorite device. And it is envelope. Not envelope follower, but just envelope. And so here's how I basically came to even caring about these devices in Max4Live. It wasn't just to create a tutorial or like a teaching example for you guys, because what's happening is like I'm learning new areas, mostly because I'm making these and I'm asking myself, what area should I get to next? And we focus on sound design, and we focus on knowing the main Ableton synthesizers as much as we possibly can, operator, analog, wavetable. And how do you modulate? You modulate with velocity, you modulate with envelopes, you modulate with LFOs. Now, if you want to modulate with an LFO, you can easily do that with the LFO device, right? And all these synthesizers also have these LFOs. Even a lot of the audio effects have inbuilt LFOs. But then what about velocities? Well, only the synthesizers have velocities. And what we just saw, well, what if I want velocity on the phaser? That sounded amazing, right? Higher sounds or more velocity, impactful sounds had more of a phaser effect added to it. It's dynamic. It's more dynamic because what we love in this computer digital music realm is we want dynamicism. I think a big truck went by. So that's why I was like, well, how would I add velocity to something that doesn't have velocity? And that's when I thought, I think that's what that envelope follower did, you know? And so that's what we just covered. But then I thought, well, hey, what are we doing when we're creating sounds? Remember we did all of that drum synthesis? Well, we were using envelopes. Envelopes is also modulation. Why? Because right now, if I hit a note, okay, and if I hold it down, why? Because this envelope sustain is all the way up, and there's no attack, so it's just full volume for as long as I hold it. But how, and what are we playing with right now? This is playing with the volume of A. So how would I modulate volume? Well, I will say I will use an envelope to modulate the volume. And what I will do with it is I will say, I want you to start high and go way low. That's why you're not hearing it very often. And if I hold it down, You're not hearing anything because there's no sustain. See how when I put up sustain, it goes up? But so what I thought, because we were doing so much of these short sounds, is I thought, well, this is all well and good. Why? Because I can put this envelope on my volume. Let's go over here to filter, click on envelope. I want to put this envelope on the filter, right? Got to give an amount. Sometimes when you have an envelope, you have to route the amount. It does it by default with oscillator A, but for filter, you have to give it this envelope amount, which says start this filter frequency high and crank it down to what we set in here. The LFO has its filter. So what was happening? I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, that's all well and good. When you're in a synthesizer, you have envelopes. But again, what if I had a phaser? What if I wanted the amount of the phaser? And I'm going to just bring the envelopes back up here because I want it to ring so you can hear more of the effect. You're probably going to want to use a phaser or a flanger or a chorus. Those are modulator effects, which, look, they've got their own built-in LFOs, so some do. But how would you put an envelope on there? You know what I mean? Like that would be something that you would want to do. So you would want to have a way to put an envelope on there. So I'm actually going to go into Max4Live and I'm going to search for the envelope. And it's just called envelope. In fact, I believe it's a Max for MIDI effect, just called envelope here. Now, I believe the updated version is found in audio effects, or excuse me, it's found in MIDI effects, and I believe it's just called the envelope MIDI. So we can use either or. I think this is just the updated one, but I'll use the updated one. Actually, let's just use the updated one because we're not afraid of change here. So what do I want to happen? I want something to go, I'm going to put the sustain all the way down. So this is a free running envelope. I don't want there to be any attack. And I want something to start high and go low. Now maybe I want the amount to start high and go low. So no. Now maybe that doesn't even sound good, but I want to just do that here. So let's go map to amount. See how it goes from all the way high down low. Now we could also, now velocity down here is interesting. Now if that means this velocity, let's check it out. Simultaneously, we could give it an attack. Let's see what happens now. I'm going to just put this back down to 0. That's weird that the velocity is giving it this curve. All right, well, if you want curves, do that. So I'm going to just keep these default right now. Now, we should have this amount open up and then go back down with this attack we just added. Oh, look at that little ball. That sounded cool. We just gave, listen to that cool envelope on the phaser. Listen again. I need more volume here. This volume got low, didn't it? No, that wasn't good. Let's start it back again. Let's give it a bit more decay. Let's put them both at 2 seconds. Oh, wait, how do you do that? 200? 2,000? Okay, ready? It's going to go up for 2 seconds, the amount, which means the amount of the effect of the phaser. Now, if you wanted that to repeat, well, you wouldn't really want to use the envelope MIDI. What would you want to add? If you just wanted this thing to repeat a triangle that goes up 2 seconds, down 2 seconds, well, and you wanted it to just repeat like that, well, then, I mean, to be honest, you wouldn't even need to use the envelope. The envelope is more for something that, like, you want to give a custom envelope to something. So that was pretty cool. Let's get rid of the phaser flanger. Probably one of the coolest examples for this. would be, and I'm actually just going to delete this one. I kind of like that other envelope. That just has more stuff. I kind of like this more simplistic one. I'm going to take sustain all the way down, and I want to go into filter here, and I want to map this to, I want to map it to the filter drive. Now it's probably going to go way too high up, so I'm going to take the max way down. So when we play this, we're not only getting the envelope from the filter, from the volume, but this filter drive. Now, this filter drive, we're giving extra punch. Why? Because we are introducing distortion that when we hit a note, there's going to be, 6 to 7 dB of distortion that's going to go down to 0. So that quick little swoop is going to give it an extra interesting punch. So let's turn this off, turn it on. See what I mean? Now, if you didn't use this envelope, I mean, yeah, you would be in here and you'd be like, oh, hold on 1 second. You got to delete it because it grays out. So check this out. So filter drive nothing. See how we got that? But it applies over the whole thing. So if we wanted to get extra crazy, we could drop the envelope. And in fact, let's drop the better envelope because I want to map multiple effects. Actually, can we do that in here? Yes, we can. Okay. So I'm going to take the sustain down. I don't need any release. And I want to map this to the filter drive. Now, again, I don't want it to open up all the way because it'll probably blow apart Ableton, but I'm going to turn this down just so it doesn't get too crazy. Because it would say, if it was at 100%, it would say the filter drive all the way up, which I think was like 32 decibels of filter drive. So let's see what this does. It's going up to 5. I like that. It's giving it this interesting. Now let's give it some release because it does have that quick little abrupt little cutoff. Here when it ends, there's like a, here, let's get the release. See how it's smooth? We love release. Release is your friend. But now let's go into here. We can map it to other things. Remember I told you this is the more modern, up-to-date one? What would be a good one? I think reverb could be a good one. Check it. Maybe I want there to be reverb and then I don't want there to be reverb. So let's map it to dry wet. How cool is that? But maybe I don't want it to go all the way back because I want it to be like really punchy. So let's lower the top amount. So like, we could delete this and we could have our, so you've got that beautiful reverb on your sound. It sounds nice. But what if we just wanted reverb, want to go, swoop? That's when you would do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some pretty important Max4Live devices. So let's, I want to start fresh. Let's just open up a MIDI track, even if we don't even use a MIDI track. I want to see what we've got here. So I'm going to go into Instruments, and I'm going to Group and Folder. Now I've got these guys added to my instruments. I kind of wanted to have a little bit more of a say on that. It's so funny because it just reminds me, like, we need to get comfortable with the uncertainty of life because the only thing we can be certain of is uncertainty. And so it just helps you get through life easier. So anyways, whenever you see solid box, that's just a regular native Ableton device. When you see this, it's a Max4Live. All of your Max4Live stuff will be in these folders, except they will arbitrarily add them, the ones they feel are the most important, to your instruments and audio effects, so you don't have to go searching. That's something they just did with Ableton Live. A lot of these Max4Live devices I haven't used really in a very long time, especially since I upgraded to Ableton Live 11. So like I had to like reinstall all of them. And I guess when you open them up, they just get added. So before we get going, because those are really the big ones. Again, if you go into packs, that's where all of your packs will be. These are my packs. Some of them are like massive. Like some of them are like 8 gigabytes. Like a lot of these like grand piano, Latin percussion, orchestral mallets. These are multi-sampled orchestral instruments that were like being multi-sampled with all these amazing microphones, wonderful instruments, and like you can read more about them on the Ableton website. But these are the ones I decided to download and install because I don't want to like load up my computer. These laptops these days are just, they can get just filled up really quickly. But if we're looking around here, you know, like there's obviously other Max4Live ones. You know, look at this, 3 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes. Orchestral woodwinds is 7 gigabytes. And you might say, hey, just throw it on an external drive. Well, then it doesn't load as quick. You know, like you want these things to play quickly. When you drop an orchestral brass, it's like a multi-sampled sampler. So like there's like hundreds of sounds in that sampler, all matched to different velocities where they'll get triggered. So like you don't want to lag in there when you're trying to load things and play things. Like we're in the year 2022. Like unless you're using the most resource heavy things, all these plugins, things should just play well and there shouldn't be delays or latencies or your CPU spiking. So in any event, yeah, you would download them here. You could even click this link to see the packs, but you get all of this stuff with the full version of Ableton Live. All the Max4Live stuff will be added in here. The Max4Live audio effects, we might go over some of these before we get going. Again, they will add them to various well-used Max4Live devices will just get added now into your instruments and audio effects. But Max4Live, that's where all the activated ones will be. Buffer Shuffler is a cool one. Like think beat repeat in under audio effects. It's just a way to like cut up and stutter things because the way you do that is like you set a buffer. So if you have like a sample and it's like a drum break, you know, you would say you set a buffer size and then that buffer like repeats, you know, like chops like that will, you know, I don't really care to get into that. Convolution Reverb Pro, you didn't have a convolution reverb prior to Ableton Live 9. The regular reverb is an algorithmic reverb, which basically is like a reverb that you can tweak the parameters and based on the math of it, it will digitally create the math for those spaces. But the convolution reverb, it uses impulse responses. So like people actually go out into an area and like make a really loud sound and they record the way it bounces around a room, and that's called an impulse response. And they take that impulse response and they put it in the convolution reverb, and this convolution reverb, whatever convolution reverb device you have, it then takes your sound and then it then maps it out through that impulse response. And what it does is it gives you, you know, whereas a regular reverb might just give you like a default reverb tone, this can give you like unusual tones. So you would like come into Convolution Reverb Pro and you can say like, oh, I want it to sound like, well, let's just stick with this one. Let's go back and just throw a operator on here. Just a sine wave. And like, look, real places. This is like the default. It sounds good. Like, so if we inactivate, but now listen to whatever an Arundel Nave is. It's a real place, apparently. Look at all these. Look at all these. Amazing. Put it on. First, dry. Big thing is dry and wet. If I put this all the way to dry, you effectively do that. Wet all the way. It's only the reverb. So you mix between the dry and wet sounds to get something you like. I hear someone saying, I kind of want to put an envelope on that convolution reverb. Go do it. That's a good idea. envelope follower, grain freeze is really cool. Let's do grain freeze here. In fact, I should probably put it after the reverb. Let's minimize this reverb. Let's see if this does something cool. Cool. LFO. Some of these, like, they're just whatever, you know? Some of them are really cool, like what we're doing right now. If you like that grain freeze, you could come over here, insert a MIDI track, and a really cool Max instrument is the granulator. That's one you definitely want to download. It's a granular synthesizer. So just go and get any sample. Just go to samples. It doesn't even matter what it is. Ideally something that's like long, like this. This, I guarantee this will sound good. And so see this little like, oh, I gotta go to granulator. See it there? Now you change this stuff. Let's turn that velocity down. Can change the position. Might want to put some LFO on the position. How do I get that? I'm going to put LFO on this spray or the file position. Oh, down here. Like I'm playing up the keyboard. Let's put some on the grain size. Let's maybe take the LFO rate down. Where is it? So yeah, that's when you definitely got to play with granulators. Really cool. Loop shifters, pretty cool. Does a similar thing. Look, we found our boys, Poly and Multi. If you guys go crazy and literally download every single Max4Live device, you'll have like a billion of these. But these are some of the best. These drum synths are really cool. You're like, yo, I'm sick of searching for like snare and clap cymbals. Well, you can just literally drag this anywhere. Drum synth, kick, and now you've got record enable. Now you've got this. And of course the volume would be up to like 1 million. Wow. What is it so loud? I'm like, maybe I'm just turning into an old person. Ah, that's so damn loud, I tells you. Drop a limiter if you're worried about that. Yeah, why the hell is that loud? So you've got a clap sound and a brush sound. Well, if you add the brush up. Maybe you can't click the brush. That's weird. So in any event, what am I going to do? I don't even know if I like having... I might go back to the folder view, to be honest. There's like too many of these right now. I'm just annoyed that this volume is like, it's so bright. It's like they want to be like, listen, we've got really cool stuff here. So you've got this very interesting, customizable, Yeah, now it works. Why? Because this cutoff was all the way down, so you like couldn't hear the brush. You got this is like the filter you got on here. Start bringing the clap. Random, so every time you hit it's a little bit different. And this has got its own cutoff too. So yeah, you've got a lot of really great stuff. The kick is great. What the hell? Why did... Get some filter drive. Can I give it like a really subby tail? Oh, you gotta have a click. Ring modulation. I mean, they really thought of everything, didn't they? Pitch envelope. Decay. So yeah, and then the MIDI effects, that envelope, which was awesome. You know, you can just throw this envelope here. Map the envelope to frequency. You know what I mean? Get rid of sustain. Take this in. Maybe lower the amount if it's too intense. Without. Well, it's... You have to like delete these to get this thing to go back up, but I'm sure you can see how cool that is. Let's make it go farther out. I need more amount. Wonderful, wonderful. Instant house. What do you really need? Instant house. It's Chaos Lady's back. What do you like about instant house? The chaos. She likes chaos and instant house. What can I say? The LFOs. Whatever MIDI monitor, you know what I mean? Like it's just very unique things, but like I'm trying to go over like the most interesting ones. And yeah, man. I mean, don't worry. Like we'll be going into, oh geez, and then there's another one you guys just have to know about, bouncy notes. We got to get to bouncy notes. Oh boy, we got to get to the bouncy notes. It's a very unique device. And I'm going to quickly go into here, add a limiter just in case sounds get crazy. So if we record enable this and we click up button, you'll see this thing bouncing on a piano roll. So go into samples. I don't know. This is like some weird synth sound, I guess. Oh, okay. So this is actually like a MIDI effect. So I'm dropping this sample, bang, bang. See that? Let's give this some release. Yeah, this is one that you definitely would want to play with. Now, instead of playing notes, you can actually go to auto. And you can change like how many. I've got to turn on the frequency. These like sounds are killing me. lifetime, make them longer, shorter. That's it. That would be one you would want to check out. Next, SDHO, I think we're actually going to dive into these packs because I never really play with these packs. You know what I mean? And I knew at some point I would get comfortable enough with like all of the native Ableton stuff that I would then venture into Max4Live and be like, okay, what's really here? What's really useful? Everyone knows about LFO. I think everyone knows that the envelope follower can do some pretty important things. You know, you got convolution reverb, you've got the LFO, and I mean, my God, if I wasn't doing so much sound design with you guys, and especially, you know, like making the percussion sounds, the drum sounds, just seeing how important the envelopes were, you know, that envelope that starts high and goes low really quickly, you know, you start thinking, well, man, like, what if I could put custom envelopes on things that you could never put envelopes on before? What if I could put LFOs on things I never thought to put them on before, like devices that don't have LFOs, you know? And then the shaper goes one better, and it says, well, hey, well, with the envelope, with the LFO, you can only modulate with a sine, a square, a random, but what if we could give you can make your own customizable LFOs? You know, obviously the free running envelope here, those granulator things that we were looking at. You've got these interesting devices with all these drum synths and that's where I think like the future of synthesis is going, is that you're not going to have to know all of this stuff. You know what I mean? You're not going to have to know all of this stuff. Like, you're literally just going to you're going to be like, oh, let's make some sounds in Ableton. And someone's going to be like, all right, I'm going to throw the green jelly synthesizer on there. And they'll open it up and it'll be like a little green ball, and they'll touch the ball and it'll make a cool sound. And then they might drag a part of the ball and the ball will make a weird sound. And then they'll stretch the ball and that'll make the ball have more of a decay. You know what I mean? But it always sounds good. You know what I mean? Because if you think about it, like, people don't have to know anything anymore these days. And that wasn't like a grand picture of the world. I mean, like, in terms of like creation, you know, like you can go to like AI art websites and just type in a few sentences or a few words and it'll make amazing art for you, you know, like the new AI art, like Dolly and Midjourney or whatever. I would look those up if you were interested. And let's face it, like with sample packs, with like royalty-free music, like if you're someone who makes videos, you need music. You know, you're not trying to learn Ableton so you can have your own original music that doesn't get copyrighted. You're like, oh, I want like this kind of a vibe. And then you go and you throw it in. And maybe you go further. Maybe you do what a lot of people do with Ableton, which is they know there's all of this stuff to learn. No one has like 10 years to learn it all unless you were to find the best sound design teacher in the world. You know what I mean? To be able to do that, you would have to learn so much. And so then what you would be able to do is you would be able to get like a sample pack. And then instead of just having like a vibe that you want and throwing it into your project or whatever, because you need music, now you'll have different sets of drum breaks, different sets of chords, different sets of other things. They might be grouped into areas. So you could just go into Ableton and throw all these things and make something more customizable. If you want good sounds and you know that people make good sounds on like whatever is the trendy synthesizer these days, you know, you could just play all the presets. You don't have to learn all this stuff from the ground up. Do you need to? No. Is there some good old boys club where I'm like sitting at the board of directors and I'm like, step up, young one. Let's hear what you can do with the synthesizer. Today it's going to be operator. What can you do? And if you do good and you can design and you know your LFOs and you know your waveforms, you can join the club, yeah. God, why does this sound like never mind, I won't even say the word. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, no one needs to know that stuff, but we're learning that because that's important to us. You know we don't have to spend the time to learn all of this, but why do we? Well, I don't know. It's different for everyone. But why is it important for me? Because I wanted to know that the music I made, that I was in control of everything. If I played a chord, I wanted to know, and the chord sounded so good. I wanted to know, oh, that's because it's an 11th chord. You know, I didn't want it to be these surprises. If there was a synthesizer preset that I tweaked for hours and it sounded amazing, I didn't want to think like, oh no, what would happen if I lost the preset? I'm like, oh no, this sounds good because there's oscillator detuning going on here and it's being fed into a filter, and the filter has a very long attack, but then it stays open and then it drops, and we've got subtle LFO movement on the filter. So you know what I mean? Like, I know why it sounds good. You know, I can open up Wavetable and I know what Wavetable does. So I know why when I turn the LFO up and I route it to this parameter, I know why it sounds good. And because I want to know everything, you know, I want to turn over I don't want to leave any rock unturned. Is that the saying? And so if you want to be on this journey with me, we're going to have a great time and we're not going to stop. So if you loved it and you learned something, smash the like. We're going to jump through the packs next because that's the final remaining area. What I want to know is, why do I need these packs? Yes, if I want orchestral multi-sampled mallets, I'm going to go into here. But what about some of these other ones? You know what I mean? Like, am I opening them up for like samples? Am I opening them up for good sounds? Do I even need to worry about this stuff? I don't know, because we are about to get to a place where we know everything so well that we operate in symbiosis. That was another thing that inspired me when I was watching Ableton tutorials in the early days, is that people would move so quick. And I was like, oh, you could know this thing so well that you could work so quickly that literally what you were capable of was unlimited. Have a great day.